All right. Get started here. Thanks everybody for showing up. I've been off for a month. I didn't attend the last one, but people were happy with Alicia's uh, fill in for me. And so this month, I've tried something new. I've had some calls in the last month and a half, people asking about pricing. Um, of renewable diesel and they asked why the price goes up as it does. And so I thought this would be a good opportunity to try and discuss some of these to the best of my knowledge. I'm not an expert here, but we do have some on the call. We've got Matt from Neste is on. He agreed to talk a little bit about it. We have Daniel Sigler. He's from Conrad Bischoff down in Idaho. He knows a bit about this. I think we have one or two other people who are in the industry might be able to weigh in. So feel free to jump in anytime if there's something worth mentioning. Um, so I'll start off with the obligatory intro. We have a few new people on here, but so starting off with what is renewable diesel? It's a paraffinic hydrocarbon. This is a new term I'm starting to use. I haven't used it in the past, but I'm trying to change this up to keep it interesting. And it's produced through hydrotreating of fats, oils, and greases. Uh, and so animal fats, vegetable oils, and used cooking oil. It's a drop-in replacement for petroleum diesel. It meets the same ASTM standards as diesel does, so it is the same fuel. So it's compatible with everything that uses diesel, the infrastructure, fueling tanks, generators, heaters, whatever it might be, drop-in fuel. One of the benefits, as I'll show here in the next slide, is the high cetane rating of renewable diesel compared to petroleum diesel. It's a lot higher, so it has more of a thorough and complete combustion. Uh, the chemistry is stable. It's got higher oxidative stability, so it has better storage potential in tanks. It doesn't have to be burned, whatever the protocol is for petroleum diesel. I've heard people trying to consume their fuel every 6 months so it doesn't go bad. Renewable diesel should have a longer shelf life. And more importantly for us here is that it is made in Montana and Wyoming and North Dakota. So in our region, we do produce quite a bit of renewable diesel on the national scale. Last I did the math last year, I think it was what 20% of the production in the United States was made in our region among these four refineries. Again, it is not biodiesel. So something I found out here this week, trying to look up some new stuff. Again, we have the four refineries in our region, Great Falls, two in Wyoming, and one in Dickinson, North Dakota. There are two more that have just come online or will be coming online this month. So there's a new refinery in Nebraska and then one in Hawaii. So this map shows all the states that have renewable diesel refining capacity that's active. There's a few others that I didn't show on here that I believe have slated builds to complete maybe later this year or next year. Some are retrofitting existing petroleum refineries to do more renewable, but those are the two that are online now or will be online here soon. I just thought I would list them here so people could see specifically what city and what refineries they are. So comparing renewable and bio and petroleum, just to show some benchmarks here. Again, cetane is extremely high in renewable diesel compared to petroleum and biodiesel. The energy densities are similar. Biodiesel is a little bit lower, but I usually just say renewable diesel is about the same as petroleum diesel. Again, the oxidative stability of renewable diesel is higher than petroleum. Biodiesel has some other issues with water contamination, biological growth that can inhibit its shelf life. Sulfur, which is why we have ultra low sulfur diesel to reduce the sulfur. Renewable diesel should essentially have none. Um, Life cycle emissions, this is from an emissions and environmental standpoint, is much better with renewable diesel. And life cycle carbon emissions can be about 75% lower depending on the feedstocks used. The aromatics and other impurities in petroleum diesel, it makes up about 25% of the uh, the makeup of petroleum diesel are these aromatics and other molecules, and I'll show in the next slide. Um, Biodiesel is a very uniform set of molecules, as is renewable diesel. So it's much cleaner, more precise fraction kind of renewable diesel can be thought of. Oh yeah. So and one more thing, the reason I brought up the aromatics and the impurities is that's often what is the culprit for all the soot that comes out when you have a diesel vehicle with no emission systems. You can roll coal and blow black smoke. With renewable diesel, you have a much harder time doing that because there aren't all of these impurities. Uh, this is a new way I'm representing the different molecules within the fuel. On the left, we have renewable diesel, which is most often a clear liquid and doesn't have any smell to it. And that's in opposition to petroleum diesel, which usually is colored depending on the refining process and the crude oil that was used. And it contains many, many more molecules. So in the petroleum diesel on the right, you have these aromatic and cyclic hydrocarbons represented by what look like 5 and 6 membered rings there. You also have sulfur molecules, that's the atom in yellow, and there are sometimes some metals in there. Whereas on the left with the renewable diesel, you have a very uniform set of linear hydrocarbons, and I represent one there. I think it's like a 15 carbon chain. So that's kind of visually the difference between the two fuels, and you would smell the difference. Burning the fuel. This is a real picture I took, but I did change the contrast a little bit to show the smoke and the flame a little bit better. But on the right is petroleum diesel, and on the left is renewable diesel. And so you can see the soot, and you can actually grab it. Like it's so thick that you can grab it and it'll show up on your hands. And a little thing I do sometimes in presentations in person is I have 2 kerosene lanterns, and you can kind of replicate this firsthand, and it's pretty convincing for people when they see it. But because of all this soot from the petroleum diesel, this is what your diesel particulate filter and your emission systems have to deal with, and they do pretty well at it. And the emissions after that emissions system is pretty similar to renewable diesel. It's pretty clean coming out of new diesels, but in order to do that, you are fouling these diesel particulate filters. You're consuming some diesel exhaust fluid. There's a lot of things that have to go into doing that. Whereas if you run renewable diesel through that same emission system, it's not going to foul it because it's not actually having to work very hard. So, in other words, all these new vehicles that do have meet these higher emission standards, they've been designed to deal with a pretty ancient fuel, whereas a newer fuel wouldn't really require that and could meet some better emission standards. So this is the new part that I'm definitely not an expert in, and I'm happy to have anybody weigh in here. But I came across this week. Neste released their Q1 report from 2026, and this is focused on Europe, the European market, as best as I can tell. They do show the United States used cooking oil on this left graph. But what they did mention in this report was that there was a stability in renewable feedstocks. So whereas the fossil fuel market has been pretty volatile, they have seen in Europe that the feedstocks have been pretty stable, which has allowed them to increase revenue without having to increase the production costs. And then they report that the U.S. feedstocks have started to increase because of the increased demand of renewable diesel. And I'll try and circle back and touch on that again. But that's what they mentioned in Europe for Q1. They also showed this, and if you see the last bar, which is Q1 of 2026, that's the shorter bar there on the far right. The volume sold was lower than previous quarters, but the margin was a lot higher. So that's because the selling price is higher and the feedstocks had stayed pretty consistent. So yeah, at this Q1 report, they mentioned the margins were just so much higher. Let's see. This is and this maybe should have been after, because I'll mention Calumet Montana Renewables here in the next couple slides. But the EPA has released their new renewable fuel standard requirements, and they have increased the volume of renewable biofuels in the blending fractions moving forward. So they've I guess I could try and read this. I just posted this an hour ago, so I don't remember what it said, but it's pretty much showing the future for renewable demand is going to be higher, and therefore the refineries are planning, the projected volumes are also planning to increase in the next year or two. And then a few people have reported what the information Energy Information Administration released, which was increased their forecasts for renewable diesel production. So compared to last year, they're anticipating larger volumes of renewable production in 2026 and 2027 because of those EPA requirements. So Montana Renewables, which is here in Great Falls, they recently finished their transition and build out for their max SAF project, which is going to increase the volume of sustainable aviation fuel that they produce. And because of that, their volume production was down because the plant was sort of shut down. But because of this renewable volume obligation, as I just mentioned, they anticipate increased production and have an outlook in the coming couple of years of over a 10% increase. This is pretty complicated, and I'm not going to point to anything other than the bottom right graph. And I just wanted to highlight that their operating costs have gone down significantly for their cost to produce per gallon of production. So the production costs are as low as they've ever been for Montana Renewables here in Great Falls. So this is the question I think I keep getting asked, and I don't have the answer, but I'm going to try and just give some information and we can discuss it after. But if the profits are up and the cost to produce are way down, why does the price of renewable diesel go up? I've shown this many times in the past, but this is historic pricing for renewable versus petroleum diesel in California. And because of their low carbon fuel standards, they have credits that help bring this to par with petroleum diesel, and it really does follow very similar in California. I think this is similar in Washington and Oregon. And then in Europe, however, what I found is and Matt here from Neste can probably talk to this in more detail, but the premium paid in Europe varies significantly, and this is probably due a lot to the different incentives by the different countries' governments. But you have anywhere from it's cheaper in Italy than petroleum diesel to almost twice, or 68% is the high number here. But this was posted on a Facebook page that was, and there were some comments, and somebody from Belgium said, "Well, that's not true. The price today, right now, is $2 exactly." So I don't know how accurate these numbers are, but I just wanted to show it in contrast to what we see in the United States. There's a big variation in premium paid. And then on the right, this is for Europe in general. This line graph showing on the bottom, which is the increase in price of petroleum fuels. That's that solid line on the bottom. And then the other dashed lines are the premium paid for these renewable fuels versus the petroleum counterpart. So as the price of the petroleum fuel is increasing in the last couple months, the premium paid is actually going down. And then the top there, I just had a quote from another place that said the UK sees an average of about 10 to 15% premium for the renewable products. So this is kind of makes sense, I think, intuitively to most people as fuel prices go up. Or this is how it's related to agriculture. Fuel prices go up. Farmers and ranchers have to pay more to produce the fuels because the fuel costs more to farm, fertilizers cost more, everything costs more for them to produce the fuel, and then we see it in our fuel prices. And I think that's pretty easy to grasp. But the other way around, why does the price of a renewable fuel go up because the price of petroleum fuel is going up? And one of the reasons I have found was this isn't the best graph because the scales are kind of off, but all I want to show is these are futures for soybean oil and crude oil, West Texas Intermediate crude, and you can see the futures have gone up in sort of in concert with one another. As the future value of the petroleum product goes up, so did the futures of soybean oil. So they're kind of following in tandem. I guess you could uh, associate some of that with the increased petroleum fuel to farm this, but I think it's more than that. Uh, so kind of summarizing that, as the crude oil of crude and diesel goes up, the margins for the refiners goes up. Um, they're making more money, and therefore they're willing to spend more money on these feedstocks to make more of that fuel. This circular logic here, and so then the price of the feedstocks used to make the renewable goes up, and then it just everything is it chews into the margins and prices go up. I didn't explain that very well. I'm not an economist, but that's how I'm kind of seeing it. And we can have a discussion here. Maybe you guys can weigh in, but the factors that I've summarized here are oil prices go up, the renewable diesel price can track with it just because of market correlation. If you can sell one product for this amount, you can also sell a very similar product for the same amount. So I think it's sort of taking advantage of the current prices, just maximizing what you can with renewable. Of course, there's policy support, government incentives also will really weigh into the price that we see for renewable diesel. If there aren't any incentives like we have in Montana, we pay that premium. That's why renewable here typically costs about $1 a gallon more. Um, the feedstock costs as used cooking oil prices go up, or even virgin canola and soy, as these prices go up, the feedstocks go up, then therefore the renewable diesel or sustainable aviation fuel price ultimately has to also go up a little bit. Of course, supply and demand um, changes the prices of things. And some countries offer tax breaks for those that consume the fuel, and that's another way to effectively bring the cost of that renewable product more comparable to the petroleum product. Um, yeah, so if I can maybe have Matt Luke from Neste weigh in if he's still here on anything, maybe add some more insight into the Neste's perspective.
Yeah. I was actually in a meeting with some traders yesterday, kind of talking about some of this stuff. I guess it's more a California thing right now, but it is out west, so you guys see it, I guess. There's a lot of RD supply in California, and a lot of that has to do with RVOs. So there's a lot more fuel being put into the market. I mean, you make the fuel, then you get the RINs, right? So basically, everyone who can make renewable diesel now is making as much as they can to try to generate the RINs to get the money. So the RIN value has gone from, I think one of them told me like $100 up to 209 or something. Um, so the margins on it are huge, which means there's a lot of RD going into the state of California that maybe doesn't have a home at the value it used to have. So you're getting a little oversupply situation going on. But the margins are so big, the trades are happening short term. It's not, no one's doing these long term locked in deals. It's this month, this week, next 2 months type thing, next 3 months. Um, it's just the state's basically flooded. Um, and then I guess kind of to the feedstock point, there's a lot of facilities right now are running higher than nameplate on the output, but feedstock contracts and stuff they're locked in a little longer, right? You need to know how to feed your facility for the foreseeable future. Like you're not going to ramp up like crazy if you don't have if you can't feed the other end of it. But as some of those contracts, start nearing ends and you need to secure more, I would definitely expect feedstock prices to go up more because everyone's going to be competing for even more because everyone's running over nameplate, like I said. Um, yeah, it's all because of the RIN value because of RVOs right now.
But when they're producing all this fuel, they're separating the RIN. Then that
Yep.
would mean if there's a huge supply of RINs, the value of those RINs are probably going down, right?
You would think, but what they told, I mean, here, I'm not a trader, I'm not an economist, right? I'm an engineer. Um, yeah, well, one of them basically told me when the RVO thing was enacted this year, that is what made rents jump double, basically, like from 100 to 200. But yeah, I guess you're right. If you're separating the RIN and you start making more RINs, you don't need as many. Value should drop. But maybe I missed something. Maybe that's not the only driver for the high margins for everyone right now. But that's what I've been told is really the big push.
So the market in California, especially because I guess the fuel has to get to California to separate the RIN, or how you know how that works?
No,
No.
it's kind of like when the BTC existed. You can separate the RIN at production.
So we should see with this extra volume, we should see prices theoretically go down. But I guess if petroleum prices are high, then they don't have to go down. They probably won't go below petroleum. Um, then people,
I wouldn't say that. I know everything's really volatile right now. I try to follow some of the chats with the traders and stuff, and they'll say like, at one point, like I don't know, NorCal, SoCal, whatever it was, one day RD, like there may be deals that some other companies out there are making are at like, carb minus 20 or whatever it may be, and the next day it's like carb minus 70, and then carb minus 10. There's just big swings going right now, which is why everyone's doing these really short term things and not really trying to lock in anything.
yeah.
And I guess the other thing is with renewable diesel, and everyone talks about like the like Opus index for fuel prices and stuff. Companies have to report into those systems for them to be accurate, and like there's not really a renewable diesel index out there right now that is widely reported because there's no one reporting into it. Like you can't have just one company reporting their trades, right? Because everyone else gets competitive intel then, and it's not really a fair system. But having said that, we know that renewables in California on the diesel side account for, whatever it was at one point, 75% of the state pool, and then it dropped down to like 60 something percent. But with this huge volume rush out there, maybe this year it's up in the 80 something percent. There's not a lot of fossil diesel being moved in the state of California. I mean, there's terminals that we're at with renewable diesel that do not have fossil diesel in the entire terminal. So then you have to think like when you compare against the carb diesel as your baseline, if there's not as much liquidity on that side, how accurate is the data you're working with compared to the RD that really is the market that's not reported as much? It's kind of weird.
Yeah. Um, what's your sense in Europe? Is things aren't the same, but is it similar? Are they don't have these RVOs to produce to? They might have something similar. What's the situation there? Any idea?
I don't really talk to the commercial team there much, but I have this week. I was told that they are doing quite well also. Um, so Neste we have our refinery in Singapore. Um, now it's kind of like to Singapore fuel to the U.S. to Europe because they're both really strong markets right now.
Um, does anybody else have any questions or want to weigh in? I'm trying
Also,
to
I like
see.
your new visual with the atoms or the molecules going through the fuel coming out of the nozzle. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, I spent some time on that. That's of course AI helping us out, and I got to a point where I liked it, and I could have spent more time, and I might. But because on the left you can see there's some aromatics and there shouldn't be, and I had it changed, and then I stopped wasting my time. But
Not only was that cool, but your logo is pretty interesting too.
yeah,
And
it's almost too much. AI is too much, I think. But I'm using it while I have it, and
it's a lot, but with the subtle colors, the muted colors, it kind of takes it down. It would be, yeah, it makes it pretty serious.
like.
Yeah.
But this, I think, it really helped. I had my own molecular comparison for the last 2 years, and I thought this sort of, and I can definitely improve this, but it looks real, and maybe it's easier for people to understand. I guess time will tell. Um, let's see here. Yeah, I've been using the renewable diesel that's been available here in Bozeman or in Belgrade at our retail station. That's with Story Distributing, which is now Sunoco. Um, and I just was told last night by a friend you went to fill up and it's empty. So um, I don't know. Hopefully we'll get an opportunity to have some more here soon, and hopefully it'll be 100%. I heard in Jackson the price has gone up at their Shell station for their renewable blend. I think just similar premium that it's always been, just kind of increment ladders up as petroleum goes up. I don't really know too much more about pricing beyond that, but yeah, anyway, that's my take on why the pricing of renewable changes. I can envision some ways within a region or a state to incentivize keeping some of the fuel in the state. Like maybe you could do some kind of uh, standard pricing for the foreseeable future for in-state consumers, and there could be some tax benefit to help in-state people use that fuel. The California and West Coast market really throws a wrench into things to make them make sense. Um, the,
How close do you guys work with the farmers?
uh,
Because I
um,
know here we have farms that they get paid by the federal government to not grow anything. So we have to make it more appealing to those farmers to grow the stuff that we use to make the renewable diesel.
yeah, we do a little bit of work with agriculture, ranchers, and farmers, but just last week we were notified. I wrote a proposal to get some funding to do specific outreach for renewable diesel to farmers and ranchers, and we were awarded that. So that's going to start here in the next month, where the plan is to work with fuel producers, fuel distributors, and farmers and ranchers directly, and try and educate everybody so that the fuel distributor and the retailer and the fuel delivery truck driver knows a little bit about renewable and can hand off information to farmers and ranchers directly. And we plan in parallel with that, we're planning to do at least one agricultural convention in Montana and one in Wyoming to present to as many people as we can about this. But yeah, this is something that's starting up, and I mean, we have funding to continue doing this and ramp up specifically for that reason. So, any ideas or feedback? If you know ranchers and farmers, how would I best get in touch with them? Um, I'd like to offer them the fuel if there was some way to do that, but there's rarely is there funding to help subsidize the cost of fuel. If that were the case, it would be a little bit easier. I could just say, try a tank of this, and that would be helpful, and I think that would be convincing. But aside from that, it's how do I reach out to all these different farmers and ranchers?
Well, for Minnesota, I became a member of the Minnesota Farmers Union or Association Union, Farmers Union. So they've been a great resource. They don't know much about the renewable diesel, but they're talking with their farmers right now and trying to get me in front of the farmers to kind of see what their feelings are, and so they can kind of learn we would use it for.
Yeah, and I guess like even just showing the futures of soy and canola are going up. I think that kind of shows the demand is increasing for these products, and maybe that's enough for a farmer to realize, hey, I do actually want to farm this because look at the margins. Maybe it makes sense to make that, but with increasing diesel prices going up, maybe it makes less sense. I don't know. So there's two avenues. One is I think this is a great product for the agricultural community. They grow the feedstocks and then they can also use the fuel. So it's sort of a cyclic thing. I think that's a cool story to tell, but even one or the other side is also can be compelling enough to have people on board.
I'm pretty well connected with some of the biggest names in farming and ranching in Montana, and especially the more clean organic types like former Governor Schweitzer and Senator Tester, Senator Tester, um, and Schweitzer's brother Walt, who is the head of Montana Farmers Union, and we talk regularly. I talk to Brian regularly, and then I'm on the board of the Montana Cattlemen's Association. So we can talk about this, and I've wanted to have a meeting with you and them for a long time. I mean, a board meeting or something to be a guest. We're going to have a get together between us and the Montana Stock Growers Association later this month, and that's going to be 700 or 1,000 of the stock growers who tend to be a little more conservative, but money always talks, and if it prolongs their machinery and doesn't end up, if it ends up being a benefit in the end, they don't mind doing something good for the world too. As long as it helps their bottom line, and the Farmers Union and Cattlemen Association are kind of coming from the same spot.
The Cattlemen's
So there's,
Association meetings in Great Falls, right?
yeah,
Well,
we often meet. The stock growers is gonna be in Great Falls this month, and I've kind of been arranging and got the cattlemen. We're gonna go and have a sit down with them. So the board members of both groups are gonna have a sit down one night. So those board members will be there from the cattlemen's, and I would think that he gets you hooked up with them before or after the meeting with the stock growers, but also maybe introduce you. Well, could introduce you at the general forum. It's going to be a 2 or 3 days up there. So
yeah, I
give you a
reached
word.
out to the MCA board, and they put me in touch with the president and said to reach out to him to organize something. So I'm kind of following through with that and finding maybe the best avenue to approach that.
Well, I talk with Rich about every day, and he's or at least message. He's the former president, but he's still kind of running the thing. And then Tim Bruner is now the president, and we get along really well too. So I could certainly help that along if you want.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, when I figure out what my priorities are for this grant to do what's the best
Sure,
effective way to reach out, yeah, that might be one of them.
sure. And we have newsletters, so it could be as simple as getting in the monthly newsletter, or regular newsletter.
I'm going to see who's on here that I can ask a question to. Uh, Eric, you're in Jackson in Wyoming. You guys are using renewable for the county now, right?
We've got it on a few vehicles in a trial. We're waiting on the town of Jackson owns or doesn't know, owns the fuel pumps that we utilize. And so Tanya Anderson from the town is working on trying to get them to put it in our tanks, which would then allow us to get it without having to go to the Shell station on a larger fleet thing. But seems like there's acceptance that we can do it. It's just a matter of making it happen. But it seems like she's broken through a lot of the resistance she was having from some of the departments that were resisting. So
Yeah, and that
I've been waiting on that for the grander rollout.
the inconvenience of having to go to a separate station to get the fuel, I understand that. That makes it a lot harder.
Yeah,
Um,
it makes them the departments have to be motivated to try it. But I think we've broken through all the lots of meetings, and Jackson Mountain Resort was awesome and hosted us visiting and talking about it. I think that really helped a lot because all the mechanics and the operators were able to be there and talk to each other rather than just the sustainability folks going,
yeah,
"Hey, do this."
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Um, well, are there
I
any
just,
other questions?
sorry, this is Alicia. Eric, I just read an email from Tanya that Eric with the town has already ordered 5,000 gallons, but they're waiting to get it delivered once there's another order of 5,000 gallons. So maybe we put our heads together and find somebody else to order 5,000 gallons
Yeah,
of
we could
it.
talk with Rad Recycling over in Idaho, right? See where his fuel volumes are, and he has capacity to take quite a bit, I think.
Yeah, maybe he could just take more sooner than he would typically order to get
Yeah,
it to the
Or the
pumps where,
airport. The airport's using it, so maybe they could work together on one delivery.
yeah, okay. Well,
That's awesome. That's great. I didn't know that they were that close. That makes me really stoked.
Yeah, but that just came this week, so
Okay.
it's very new news. So cool.
All right. Well, if there's no more discussion, I will just ask anybody to reply to the invite this morning. Maybe if you have any ideas on what is of interest next time, if maybe this was interesting enough that I should get an economist to come talk with us. Um, but I don't know if that moves the needle as much as seeing the fuel and talking with fleet managers. But any suggestions are welcome, and I'm happy to tailor this for the next month to whatever I get feedback on. So thank you everybody for attending, and we'll see you at the next one.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Cool.
Thank you,
Thank you very
Jess.
much, Jeffy.